Hello, this is Bernard Brown. I'm a state program director for the Pennsylvania State Office of the Corporation for National Community Service. I'd like to welcome you to our Senior Companion program, the Adapting to National Performance Measures for Independent Living and Respite Care. I'd like to invite my partners in presentation to introduce themselves. We have Jen Irwin.
Hi, everyone. This is Jen Irwin. I am a state program specialist in the Ohio State Office.
And we also have with us Sarah Brady.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Brady. I am also a state program specialist in the Ohio State Office.
You have a very strong Ohio presence, which I won't count as a problem at all. I myself grew up in Ohio. But I do want to have send a special greeting out to our Pennsylvania Senior Companion people. And general greeting to everybody, but I got be a little bit partial there. I would like to start off, though, with some basic introduction to some of the features that you're going to be seeing on your end of the presentation. In particular, I'd like to start off by noting the closed caption option. You should see a little square above the Q&A and content button that says CC. If you're having any trouble with audio, I've heard both from our tech people as well as from some of my grantees that it can be very helpful to click on that so you can read what's going on if the audio doesn't turn out to be super reliable. All of those might be helpful as an extra feed of information while we're going, even if you can't hear us just fine. We have as options a Q&A function. Should be a little green button that you see below the closed caption. With which you can send us questions that we'll say is sort of questions on the side. We have, and we specifically say, so we also have a forum function that we're going to be using a little bit more intentionally through this workshop. That's a good segue to guiding you over to the content button, which is the blue button next to Q&A. And when you click on that, you'll see forums at the top. And when you click on that forums, you'll see a series of specific scenarios and sort of headings for when we're going to ask for you to enter information that we'll be responding to through this workshop. Below that, we have summary, and then we have files. And files is important for us for this workshop because we have some specific things we'd like you to have available to look at while we're going. We have the PowerPoint, which you don't have to worry about right now, but we do have we have the Senior Companion Program scenario, background information, work plans, and discussion questions. That's extra information that we're going to be using through this presentation. And then we have the draft 2013 SCP National Performance Measure Instructions as another document that is handy as a reference while we're going through this presentation. So with that, I'm going to get started. Moving to slide 2, we have sort of an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start off with a refresher for the basic background in I'm getting some, okay, so we have sort of a refresher in the basics of the Senior Companion rules. We have some resource to refer you to, the instructions for the activity as well as the scenarios. Hold on for one moment. I'm getting some notes that I might not be coming through too audibly. So I'd just like to leave this moment as sort of a sound check. If you're having trouble hearing what I'm saying right now, I guess please let us know through Q&A, and we can get sort of some feedback on how the sound is. So I'll just try one more test talk for a few seconds and see how that's going. Great. In Seattle, can barely hear me. I can hear you fine. So I'm basically just going to talk louder. So I'll try that. There's a little bit of white noise, a little bit of echo. So I'm getting a variety of responses about how the sound is. So I think what we'll do for right now is, since I myself don't have much I can do to adapt how I'm doing the audio, I'm going to slow down a little bit as I'm speaking. I'm going to try to speak a little bit more loudly, and I'm going to invite anybody who's I'm going to apologize to anybody who is still having trouble hearing, and ask you to please use that closed caption option so that even if, for whatever unfortunate quirks of my audio system are preventing me from coming through perfectly clearly, that you at least have it as a written version to fall back on. Sorry for that little diversion for everybody who is hearing it okay or who isn't. So we'll just try to work through it. So what I'll start with, and I'd like to present this as a poll question and ask that we get the poll out there for everybody to be able to view. We have this module posted called the Performance Measures Requirements Senior Companion Program as background information about the Senior Companion's performance measures. So what we'd like to know is how well, how many of you have had a chance to review it. We're not going to be slapping any wrists. We won't even be able to know who you are when you're responding, so it's okay. Don't be shy if you haven't reviewed it, but please do let us know so we have a sense on our end, how thoroughly we should be working through some of the background information right now, or should we go through it a little bit more quickly? So I guess we'll give it, I'll give it about 15, 20 seconds for you to go ahead and answer the poll question, and then I will proceed. So give it another 10 seconds, and we'll go for the results. Okay, I'm now going to ask for our poll results. So we've got about half of everybody, so about half of our audience, it looks like, has not had a chance to review these. I will go through these a little more slowly and sort of maybe a little more thoroughly, and we'll check in a few minutes to see how well you're understanding the basics of this after I've done that part, and then we can get into maybe a little bit more tweaking, a little bit more questions and answers if we have to at that point. What we'll start with is the majority of, or the vast majority, 90% of your unduplicated volunteers in your work plans will be using one or using these two measures here. You'll notice a few things. I'll say, first of all, that these cover pretty much everything that you likely already do, and it's pretty simple. In some ways, SCP is quite lucky in the performance measures universe. RSVP has a ton of these. FGP has certainly more than SCP, and I think just the nature of what you do and what your volunteers do lends itself to a relatively focused performance measurement. We have one measure dealing with helping people to live independently, and we have another measure helping people who are caring for their loved ones through respite services. The first one, the output, I'll just read it, is the number of homebound or older adults and individuals with disabilities receiving food, transportation, or other services that allow them to live independently. And then the outcome is sort of taking it one step further. There's a number of these same people who report having increased social ties and perceived social support. So on the one hand, for the output, we're looking at the number of people that you're supporting to live independently. The outcome is how many of them are doing or reporting doing better as a result. The second output-outcome combination refers to respite. and it is the number of caregivers of homebound or older adults and individuals with disabilities receiving respite services. And then the outcome is the number of these people who report having increased social ties, perceived social support. What you'll notice, I think, is that this is more or less the same set of measures applied to the two populations that your volunteers, we all target through Senior Companions. There's one more sort of measure that you will find once we get into this, once you have the option to do all this in eGrants, and you can start doing earlier perhaps. And that is we have set aside in a way for 10% of your programming of your volunteers to be focusing on or to be supporting people, the individuals who are in other categories. So this is not something that, obviously, if it's just 10%, it's not something we'd like you to be focusing on. But we have it there so that we avoid disrupting, to some extent, other activities you might already be doing for people who don't meet the definitions that we've been outlining in the national performance measures. So that's my basic overview right there. We've got the two measures, independent living and respite, or two sets of measures for independent living and respite, for which we need to see 90% of your unduplicated volunteers, and then 10% can be doing something else. And when I say unduplicated, I'm just going to actually, as an aside, and sort of add that here really quickly, because I realize if you haven't had a chance to review the materials that we have, unduplicated is a very precise term, a very precise sense in how we're discussing this, and that is that even if a volunteer is doing multiple of these activities, you'll be assigning them to one work plan based on what they might be primarily doing or how you'd like to assign them. So when we say unduplicated, and this will be relevant as we get into the discussion of the scenarios, it has that very kind of specific meaning. So now we're going to try another poll question. If we could push that out, that would be wonderful. And the poll question is, let's wait a second to see that pushed out. Great. This is just a check to see how well you're understanding things after I've gone through them. Say if it's crystal clear, we don't need another word of discussion about it. Maybe a little fuzzy, you're getting most of it, but could use a little bit more help. Or wait, let's go over it again because it's definitely not making sense. So go ahead, we'll give it about 30 seconds to answer those, and then we'll check the results. And I might go back through a little bit if it looks like we've got if people aren't understanding it very well. Thank you. Do about 10 more seconds. Okay, let's see the results. So right now, I guess we'd like to request the results to be pushed out. Okay, so hold on for 1 second. So what we have is we have 49% crystal clear. We have 41% fuzzy, 15% over again. So we got about half again that I think have some measure of not getting it totally. So I'm just going to run through them really quickly again, just to say that we have the two performance measures, the Actually, I'm going to back up the slideshow just to look at it with all of us one more time. So we've got the independent living measures. We have an output focusing on the number of people that you're serving, and the people we're talking about are homebound, or older adults, individuals with disabilities, who are receiving food, transportation, or other services. Then we've got the number of those people that you're serving who are doing better, who are reporting having increased social ties and perceived social support. And then we have basically the same two measures applied to people receiving respite services, so the families, the caregivers, loved ones of the people, in this case, who are homebound or older adults and individuals with disabilities. On the one hand, the number of those people for the output and the outcome, the number of them who are reporting increased social ties and perceived social support. And then Jen reminds me that also to make clear that that 10% itself is not a measure. What we're basically saying is that that's an option to just basically it's the other side of saying 90% have to be in the performance measures. The 10% can be in something else. That can be helping individuals who don't fit into our categories right there.
And Billy, can I also point out that you may actually have 100% of your volunteers who will fall into the performance measures. Some of you may not use this output option. You may actually already have activities and volunteers who are participating in solely companionship and respite care activities that align with the performance measures. So that 10% is really there to kind of help those programs that, you know, they don't exactly fit into the 90%. Those two performance measures for independent living and respite, and would need a little extra room to be able to place those companions somewhere else.
Okay. And I'm going to go in and I've noticed a couple questions that have popped up, and I think we're going to tackle these. I'm going to just tackle a few of these. And I'm going to mention that after we conclude this session, after we conclude the section at 2 o'clock from 2 to 3, we have breakout sessions by cluster where we can get much more into detail about where you guys can ask a lot of questions, and we get much more detail about answers that might be a little bit more specific to a little more specific questions. I want to make sure that the questions that we answer right now are things that are pretty general. So one question I'm noticing asking for an example of that 10%, like what's something that might not fit. I think we're going to get into that in some of our scenarios. We have thought on our end of things like assisted living, even nursing homes in some cases, and this, again, that's something we'll explore more in the actual scenario, and that you'll get to explore much more detail in the breakout session. So I think we're also going to have a chance in the session about program-specific performance measures at 1 o'clock, and also in the breakout sessions. But I'll say, in response to a question that's asked, noting some maybe not clarity about the phrase increased social ties, perceived social support, that this is the kind of thing that we'll be measuring, you'll be measuring through survey information. I'll also refer us, when we're looking at the documents and looking at what we're going to be using as reference material, when we go back to the content, look at the files, and we look at the draft 2013 SCP National Performance Measures Instruction. So I'm pulling that up. I think as everybody else should be flipping to it. One of the features on here that you'll notice is when we get into the document, page like the third or fourth page and so on, you're going to find much more information on definitions of key terms, how to calculate and measure and collect data. And so when you're looking at the terms that we're referring to now in the performance measures, and you're like, well, what exactly does that mean? I think this document is an excellent resource for answering those kinds of sort of specific questions about what we're talking about. And I think, so for now, I think I'm going to move along the slideshow so we can get into the actual scenarios, the meat of the presentation. And with that, I will hand it off to Jen. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. So as Billy was just mentioning the resources that are available, if you go down to your content button and you click on that link that says Files, you will find not only a copy of our PowerPoint presentation, but you'll also have the background information with the work plans and discussion questions that we will be running through in this presentation. If some of you are like me, you may find it easier to print out or to download that to your computer, and you'll be able to see all of the scenarios that we will be discussing as well as the discussion questions. Sometimes I find it's easier to read them that way instead of on the screen. So you'll have that available to you. And you will also have the draft 2013 SCP National Performance Measures Instructions. And this is the document that Billy was actually just briefly going over, which will really be a great resource tool for you to use while you are transitioning. If you have current work plans, you'll be transitioning those work plans into the National Performance Measures, or if you're just new to senior companions and you want to learn more about them, you'll be able to understand what we mean when we say, you know, what the National Performance Measure is, what exactly it is that we're looking for when we say independent living. You'll find the definitions there as well. Okay, so let's move on. You have those resources available to you. So let's look at the next slide. We could move the slides. And here you'll see the activity instructions. And so the main point of today's presentation is to help you feel a little more comfortable with what the new performance measures are and how you'll be able to transition your work plans into the new performance measures. So to help you do that, we have designed 4 work plans that we will go over with you, and then we have some follow-up questions that we hope that you'll participate in the forum. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to read through what we're calling program scenarios, which are basically work plans. We'll look at all the information that's presented, and then we're going to ask that you answer some discussion questions, and I will explain how to do that. If you just look in your content button and you click on the link that says forums, you will see that we have preloaded questions for each of the scenarios or work plans that we will be reviewing. And so if you could please just hit reply to those questions after we have reviewed each work plan and put your answers in there, then we can do kind of a debrief. If you have questions or you have other additional comments along the way, you can feel free to use the Q&A button, or you can put those questions and comments in the forum itself. So if we want to move and start looking at the project, Billy, you want to go through the background for the scenarios?
I would be happy to. So our background on this is that we're looking at a senior companion program that's in High Hopes County, whatever state you want it to be in. It's been the sponsor, the grantee, has been operating the program for 19 years. They have 100 volunteers, 4 stations. They receive some funding from the Department of Veteran Affairs and local offices on aging, and they are on an April 1st cycle, so that they're going to be working on their next application in January.
Great, thanks. So let's look at the first scenario or work plan. So if you see here, and if you have problems reading this on the screen, it is a little bit small, then I will direct you again to the Content button. You can actually print out or download under the Files the document that says Senior Companion Program Scenario Background Information, and that will have all the information that's presented here on the screen on paper for you. So let's go over this briefly. So the service category for this is Respite. Looks like there's 3 stations. We have 50 volunteers, so 50 senior companions who are servicing 100 clients. And the community need for this, of course, is, you know, there's an identified need that they need the respite care. Of course, it would be all local information. This is a very abbreviated community need. we still would have the expectation that you would provide us a lot of resource information to demonstrate what the community need is when you do actually fill out your work plan information. But we kind of summarized this for workshop purposes. If you look at the service activity, you'll see that SCP volunteers are providing direct non-medical services to their clients or care recipients in a home-based setting. So it's pretty straightforward, standard, probably what most of you have already in your work plans. The output is that the 50 caregivers will have respite services provided to them on a weekly basis. There's an intermediate outcome here, as well as an end outcome, which is measuring improved quality of life. So looking at this work plan, let's go to the forum questions and see if we can get some responses from you all. Do you think the activities that are outlined in this work plan fit with the national performance measures? Does anyone think that, no, this wouldn't fly with the national performance measures, or it's completely out of line with our goals that we're trying to accomplish within the Senior Companion Program? And I'll just wait a few seconds to see if I can get some responses. And let's see. It looks like yes, and you are correct. Now, these are very hard questions, as you can see, and we, as Billy stated before, we are fortunate with Senior Companions that a lot of your activities will pretty much fit right in with what the national performance measures are. So yes, these activities would be appropriate for the national performance measures. So what are the things we would need to do to tweak this work plan so that it would fit with the national performance measures? Once again, I'm going to direct you to the forum questions. So how would you transition these work plans? We've established that the activities are appropriate. How would the output need to change? I'll give you a few seconds to put your answers in the forum. And let's see, getting lots of responses, which is great. And actually the responses for this, I'm sorry if it isn't clear because it is a little confusing. If you would like to respond where it says Work Plan Respite for Caregivers Scenario Question 2, if you could put responses under that thread, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And so to move things along, the output in this case obviously doesn't exactly match what we're looking for as an output in the national performance measures. Going back to the measures themselves, this would fall under the category of respite. And so we, of course, would want the output to read number of caregivers or homebound or older adults and individuals with disabilities receiving respite services. And so you'll find that once we have the National Performance Measures module, which will be available to you, you'll be able to automatically accept this output as part of your work plan. And so you won't have the option to make up, a different output that would align with this outcome. And so you would select this as your output. Then moving on to the outcome, how would the outcome need to change? As you can see in this current outcome, which is probably very similar to what some of you have right now, it looks like they are measuring the improved quality of life for themselves and or the person they are caring for. This, of course, does not exactly match what the outcome is for the national performance measure. So instead of measuring improved quality of life, you would be measuring the increased social ties or perceived social support for the caregiver. Are there any questions about this? I'm looking to see if we have any questions, and I don't see any questions. Okay, so if we just want to move on then to the next scenario, which once again is respite. You'll see once again that the service category is the adult daycare this time. We have one station with 30 volunteers servicing 30 clients. And of course the community need would be something that supports the use of senior companions for this particular activity with your own local data and local input. The service activity will be that the senior companions are establishing the relationship of support and care with their adult clients within the adult daycare. And then we have the output that senior companions will provide the one-to-one assistance with their clients. There is an intermediate outcome in this particular work plan, and then we have an end outcome that they will see an improvement in their clients' attitudes. And something that I have kind of glossed over and failed to mention was that for the new national performance measures, you will not be reporting an intermediate outcome. So these work plans were taken from current projects. They were, kind of finagled a little bit so that we won't identify anybody personally. But you'll see they have the intermediate outcome because for performing for impact, we did require there be an intermediate outcome. Now with the new national performance measures, there will be no intermediate outcome, and so you will just be reporting on the output and the end outcome. So looking at this, do we feel that the service activity is appropriate for the national performance measures? I'm going to ask you to go to the forum again and see what your responses are. And it looks like I'm seeing some yes and yes and yes and yes. And it is. These are appropriate activities that would fit into the national performance measure. It is performing respite care in an adult daycare setting. And that is acceptable under the new performance measures. So the changes that would need to be made will, of course, come with the output. The output does not align with what the respite output was, as we just went over. So, of course, you would need to change, exactly what is being counted to reflect what the national performance measure is. And once again, you will just automatically choose what the output is, the national performance measure output, when we have the module available to you. And then once again, the end outcome is measuring the change in the client's attitudes. And with the national performance measures in respite, we of course want to measure their increased social ties or perceived social support. And so of course, that would have to change as well. You may need to make some tweaks to your data collection. You won't be measuring the exact same things. However, they are very similar. I also want to mention, while we're talking about the work plans, and I briefly mentioned data collection, there will be additional information that's provided to you in other sessions about this. But for senior companion programs, there is proposed that there will be a survey instrument called the Senior Core Independent Living Performance Measure Survey that will be available to you to use as the instrument for your data collection. This document is still in the clearance process, and so we don't have it available readily, but be looking for that information and more information about that as we start with the requirements. And so, Billy, do you want to go over the last two scenarios?
I would be happy to. So we're going to proceed to another slide. This one's a work plan for scenario of independent living. The work plan service category is companionship. I want to be clear, there might be a little typo in here about the number of veterans. We're looking at the outputs, but we're talking about 20 clients and 20 volunteers. The community need is that older veterans often feel alone and isolated, leading to depression. The service activities, and this is important, so let's focus on this and read it slowly. SCP volunteers will support older veterans in hospice care and those living in 4 wards of the George Washington VA Medical Center, where they most likely will remain and are probably not getting out. The output is that the veterans age 55 and over will receive daily visits and support from SCP volunteers. And an intermediate outcome is that 80% of participating veterans will feel less isolated and lonely because of the daily visits. And the end outcome is that 75% of those participating, the veterans, will report that they feel less depression. So we'll now move over to our forum and and look at the questions. And when we're answering these, please try to answer them, just because on my end reading them, I'm having an easier time spotting them if they're underneath the question that we're looking at. So look at the independent living companionship scenario question 1 right there for entering your answers. So the first question is, do the activities outlined fit with the national performance measures? I'll ask them together. So the first part, do they fit in general? And then what would we do to transition them, if not, into the national performance measures? So go ahead and answer in there. So the basic problem with this activity is that we might have people that we're supporting who are not actually living independently, and so one fundamental way that this would have to be adapted to fit the new performance measures is that the activity of supporting people living in a hospital where they're most likely not going to exit from, at least alive, does not align with the performance measures. So that's sort of the big thing to look at. We also have the outputs and the outcomes. We're going to be narrowing it down to just one outcome, of course. And again, we're going to be looking directly at the performance measures for independent living, the number of homebound or older adults and so on receiving food, transportation, other services that allow them to live independently, and the number of homebound or older adults and individuals who report having increased social ties and perceived social support. So we're going to have to zero in on those specific measures for this activity. Now, another aspect of aligning it is in the numbers. We still have that 10% that can be supporting individuals in others that aren't fitting into the independent living measure or the respite measure that we discussed before. And so this is an activity, and these are individuals that are being supported that at that reduced level, at that 10%, still might be able to fit in. And then, as you might be noticing, depending on how you're assigning volunteers as unduplicated Twitch work plans, that also can be a factor in getting this one to fit in. So now we're going to move along to the final work plan. And this one is an independent living plan for companionship. The community need is that 1/3 of older adults in High Hopes County live alone. Most individuals prefer to remain at home but suffer social isolation and loneliness. Services such as homemaker, meal or home-delivered meals and personal care do not provide the level of socialization needed. The service activity, which might seem pretty familiar to us, is that senior companion volunteers will provide weekly visits or maybe once or twice a week, to adults 60 years or older, and to select disabled individuals. For the output, we have 110 clients will receive one visit per week for approximately 2 hours. And then we have an intermediate and end outcome, with 80% of clients will feel less isolated and lonely, and then end outcome, 95% of clients will report being able to remain in their own homes. So go ahead and we can work on getting those into the forums. Thank you. So I'm back, and so the first part of the question is do the activities outlined fit with the national performance measures? And the short answer is yes. In terms of the actual activities, they do. What might we do to transition these work plans into national performance measures? And in terms of, are the activities appropriate? How would the outputs need to change? How would the outcomes change? And the basics are that we have to go back again to the specific measures as we have them with independent living, the number of people we're serving who are receiving food, transportation, or other services to allow them to live independently, and then the number of those people who are reporting having increased social ties, perceived social support. And again, so this is one where the core activity probably won't have to change very much, but we'll be writing it as per the new performance measures phrasing and the actual measures themselves as we look into the outputs and outcomes. So now I'm going to hand it off to Jen to wrap up.
Thanks, Billy. So, just some general observations from you guys. We'd really like to hear your feedback about what issues you think you may encounter trying to meet the requirements, if there are any. If you could answer that in the forum or the Q&A, and we can continue to address those for you. But it would just be nice to know what your feedback is, how you feel about this. Are there other things we can do for you, training, materials, resources? So going forward, you have an easier time to be able to start to meet the requirements. The other thing that we really wanted to address, because it seemed to be a sticking point in some other presentations that were given, were addressing what the number of volunteers were in the work plans. The scenarios that we presented here actually contained 175 volunteers in them. But if you look at the background information in the very beginning of this, you'll see that the program only actually has 100 volunteers. And so this was something that you were able to report out on. You were able to have duplicate volunteers that were represented in work plans. But now with the new national performance measures, we're asking you to only report on unduplicated volunteers. So I'll say that again. We only want to see unduplicated volunteers represented in work plans with the new national performance measures. So you may have volunteers who are serving in two different capacities. You may have a volunteer who's providing respite as well as providing companionship. What you'll have to do is determine where you want that volunteer to appear in your work plans, and you'll have to pick one, whether it's respite or it's companionship, and that volunteer would only be represented once. So that's just something that I wanted to make sure was clear, but obviously we'll welcome any kind of questions that you may have. And at this time, Sarah, are there any questions that we can address right now in our remaining time?
Sure, absolutely. Some of these questions are going to go back into earlier in the presentation. Specifically, when Billy was speaking, he referenced the term disability on a number of occasions. Is there a formal definition for disability at this time?
Yes, this is Jen. If you look in the performance measures senior companion instructions draft document, there should be a definition that is associated that will help you identify the population that we are speaking about there. And I can try to look for that. Okay.
And then through the presentation, the term unduplicated volunteer came up on a number of occasions. Does that mean a companion who sees multiple in-home clients can only be counted one way, even though he or she does multiple task respite for one client and then companionship outreach for 3 others? Can that person only be counted once?
This is Bernard Brown. The short answer is yes. That person can only be counted once. So this is going to be a factor of decision-making and judgment call on your part as the director, deciding is this person primarily doing one or the other. And you can look at it as perhaps as a difficult decision to make or some level of flexibility as you're planning out how to assign people to the different work plans.
Thank you. And another question that came up is, are companions to be serving in long-term care facilities?
I'll take this one too. I think this is not where we intend them primarily to be serving, and I think I just jumped us back to a slide that talks about this other category, and it's in a footnote, but I think it phrases it well to answer this question, that the grantees are encouraged to place all volunteers in national performance measures. But we have this option so that grantees that serve individuals, such as those in long-term care facilities, who don't meet the definitions, can continue to serve those clients. So again, we're encouraging, and our intention is to be placing all volunteers in the performance measures, but we recognize that we still might have some that are in other categories. And I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay. And there was a question specifically about the adult daycare example. The question is, in the adult daycare example, the people served are not homebound. Should that be part of the 10% other activities?
Well, in the example that we gave, it was for respite, and so there is actual respite care that's occurring because the caregivers at the adult daycare, those are the caregivers, and so you would be able to include the adult daycare clients under the respite measure. You would not include them in companionship, but you could under the respite measure.
Okay. And then another question that came up is, will the use of the surveys that are under development be mandatory once they are released? And is there an estimated release date?
Those are 2 questions that I think we'll need to get back with you on because I think, it's still a work in process and I don't have an exact answer. So I would, what we'll do is we'll post that question on the forum, and then I will talk with Senior Corps to get a clear answer, and we will post that answer on the forum.
And I think,
okay.
And this is Bernard Brown again. I think, yes, we can post on the forum. I think we also might be able to hopefully get some more clarity on that before we get to the breakout sessions. And so hopefully at 2 o'clock we'll be able to talk about that in a little bit more, with a little more precision.
Okay. And another question about a specific activity. Can a telephone reassurance daily call to homebound clients count for senior companion time in the outcome areas of aging in place? So
that's a good question. I'm going to actually consult one of the documents we have in content, the draft 2013 SCP National Performance Measures Instructions. And so I'm just going to do this as a little bit of an exercise. I think it's a good way to demonstrate what this document is good for. And so what we'll be looking at is definitions of key terms. And as we're looking at, let's say, pages 2 and 3, on 2 we have the actual measure, which includes receiving food, transportation, other services. So then if we scroll down to page 3, we have definition of key terms, and looking at receiving food, transportation, and other services, individuals should receive the supports needed to maintain independent living. Not all individuals require the same supports, and so may include the following. So looking at that, we can post this to the forum and give a more definitive answer later. But yes, that would seem to be a service that helps people, a support that helps people maintain independent living. So I wanted to do that just to answer the question, but also to point out that this is exactly how the function we'd like this document to be used for when you're looking at it, and also as we're answering questions when you call us and state offices, that this is a document that helps us with okay, so what exactly do we mean by older adults, individual disability, supports, and so on. I think it can be really useful for us as we're working through trying to adapt and align and really figure out how do the terms that we're using apply to the actual activities on the ground. Thank you.
Okay, and another question, this is probably posed by a current grantee, but can you tell them if there is someone where they can forward their current work plans to have them reviewed to see if their work plans meet the national performance measures?
This sounds like a great call your state office question. Jen, do you agree?
Yeah, I was just going to say, talk to your program specialist, and they can help you with that technical assistance.
Okay, and so this goes back to there being universal forms, and you may have answered this, so I apologize if I'm reposing a question. But will there be a universal form to be used when signing up a client? So on how our outcomes, that will help us identify how our outcomes are measured?
So if you're referring to the survey instrument, that is what is in the clearance process right now to collect the data that we are asking you to measure with the performance measures. For output measures, which you'll be basically counting, there isn't a universal form that we have, but I think there are samples that are available to you on the Resource Center that you can certainly use in your own program.
Okay. And another question that's popped in here is you talk, or the question is nationally when you take the outcomes of less loneliness, improved attitudes, and less stress, will this data be translated into cost-saving measures for our funders? The fear is that the improved health is valuable, but there are concerns about funders respecting feelings as a measure.
So this is, I'd like to take this one. I think we are putting out these performance measures as a way for us to be able to, all of us, grantees, corporation included, to be able to tell our story in a unified way. But we don't mean to say that you shouldn't collect other information that might be otherwise, in other ways, useful to you for your programming or useful to you for meeting the needs of other supporters, other funders. So I think, on the one hand, we're going to be focusing on these particular measures, On the other hand, feel free to collect additional information, additional performance measures that that you need for your purposes or for other funders' purposes. Thanks.
And there has been a lot of follow-up questions specifically related to the phone reassurance question that was asked earlier. So the big question that's coming up is phone reassurance even appropriate for senior companions? Is senior companions supposed to focus on clients and companions face-to-face?
I'll take that. I mean, I think I want to say that I'm going to give a purposeful non-answer and say let's talk to your. We'll try to tackle it in the forum questions as follow-up, but B, talk to your specialists and talk to your state offices about this question. I certainly, as I'm thinking about it, I think, yeah, I mean, purely just doing phone calls to people seems a little bit light as I think of senior companion activities, but I certainly could see it as part of a set of supports that you're offering. So I think as we get into the particulars of whether the type of support that you're offering, if we're doing phone support, whether that's counting, whether it's something that we want to include as one of the activities, I think when we get into the particulars of it, let's check with your state offices. In the meantime, we'll try to get something up as a forum answer after this. Thanks.
And can you speak to when the new performance measures will go into effect?
So for senior companions and for foster grandparents, I believe the requirement will be with your renewal application. And anyone correct me if I'm wrong here. However,
that's how I understand it too.
Yeah. However, saying that, be encouraged that you can start adopting these measures with your continuation grants. We won't have the kind of technological infrastructure in place, and when I say that, I mean there will be a module in eGrant that will allow you to select your performance measures and enter in all of your information. That won't be available to grantees who are in continuation. However, if you want to work with your program specialist to start adopting them right now or start to migrate them, you're certainly available to do that. You would just have to do them in the regular paper format, and you would still have to meet what are the current requirements with the with the performance measures and the different percentages that we have available to you right now.
I would like to add, I think it's given the simplicity of the senior companion measures, I'll certainly be encouraging my grantees to get started on it sooner. I mean, it's you can get some practice working with them, even if it's something that you're entering into eGrants by hand rather than having the drop down immediately available. Sarah, I think we might have time, you think, for 2 more questions?
Okay. This might be just a quick question for you. Are work plans the same as care plans?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? Are work plans the same as?
Care plans.
I don't think so. When I think of a work plan, I think of something that we're entering in as part of your project application that is describing to us what a set of your volunteers will be doing and the kind of community impact they will be having. Whereas a care plan is something more about the individual relationship and outlining what you'll be doing to support a particular individual. Jen, Sarah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, not knowing what you mean by care plan, typically with programs that I have in my portfolio, the plan of care is the client-companion relationship, the services that will be offered to them. It includes things like the frequency of visits, that type of information, which you do need as part of the senior companion program. But the work plan is representative of the project. So basically what you just said, Billy, I agree with that.
Let's get one last question here, and we'll try to answer it really fast. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you, hold on, I just lost my question. Can you tell the crowd if Project STAR is going to be available as they've been in the past to help as people move forward in this new performance measure process?
I'll answer quickly. I don't think you're going to, I think in terms of the individualized by program support, probably not. What we're going to be looking at, I think, is the primary supports for technical assistance for you in this is going to be your state offices and your specialists that you work with. Jen, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for now, but we absolutely encourage you to continue to post questions on the forum. We're going to clean the forum up a little bit so it's easier to read and understand. We'll also post responses to there's one question I have that needs follow-up. We'll post it on the forum. We also want to remind you that at 2 p.m. there are cluster breakout sessions, and so you can attend those. There will be someone there to chat with live, and they can help answer your questions then as well. So we appreciate your time and your attention and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.